Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
You ready to get started?
Yeah, man.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome to an episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sydpart2, and joining me today is the one, the only, Captain Logan.
Hey, how's it going? Sorry about that. You clapped, and I thought that's what we were doing. I thought we were clapping.
No, I clap so when I'm editing the audio, I have a big giant peak and go, bam, right there.
I didn't even realize you were recording yet. I was just like, yeah, clap.
I just started, like, Pamela prompts it, and I just go record, and I'm gonna cut the rest out anyway, so. I record every conversation I have on Skype.
Oh, that's ominous and kind of foreboding, yeah.
Yeah, right? I mean, blackmail people, what? I'm gonna blackmail internet celebrities. What were we talking about again? Right! So, for those that don't know, Cap and I are doing a mini-series on Star Trek episodes just like Zazubar and I did with Doctor Who, and Cap is recommending Star Trek episodes that require little to no background, and I am going to watch them, and then we're going to record our reactions.
Yeah.
Which is what we're doing right now. So, what episode did we watch, Cap?
Well, today we watched a Next Generation episode called A Matter of Time.
Indeed, and let me just say, you're hitting my right buttons because I love time travel.
Yeah, that's part of why I did that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love time travel stuff, and this was really great to see. I love how they put it together and made it work.
I'm glad to hear that. I didn't know if you'd like this or not.
Well, okay, first, let me just talk about a little bit of confusion when I was finding the episode on Netflix, because apparently, I don't know if it was like a thing Next Generation did where they titled episodes A Matter of, but in the first season there's like A Matter of Honor, and the second season there's A Matter of something else, and I kept like, wait, what is it?
That's hilarious you had that. I'm sorry, I should have told you what season it was in.
No, it's fine because it's a funny anecdote.
It's fourth or fifth. But yeah, there are three. There's A Matter of Time, A Matter of Perspective, and A Matter of Honor.
I just found that funny. I was going through and like, is this a thing? Is this like an ongoing thing that I didn't know about?
TNG is my favorite Star Trek series, but it is the one with some of the worst episode titles. They are not good at titling it. Yeah, there are three matters of. It's like, why?
Because creativity is put into story and not titles.
Apparently, in Next Generation, that is often true, yeah.
Yeah, well, anyway, I found that to be a funny little thing while I was looking for the episode. And you know what? I'd actually seen a clip from this before. Someone made a Doctor Who Next Generation fan film just using clips from the different episodes, and when the time traveler's sitting there, it's like, they're asking you to move, Captain. They use that clip, but they put the TARDIS outside the Enterprise window. I thought that was hilarious.
I've seen that.
Yeah, so it was really interesting to see what this came from, because I was like, oh. So yeah, I mean, I did enjoy it. I particularly love time travel when it's used to question things as opposed to just, let's get these characters together and see what happens. And this did a great job of it. I think my favorite scene in this is when Picard is talking about, is there an equivalent to the Prime Directive?
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. Just asking, is there a temporal directive? I'm like, yes, there should be, but there isn't. You can pretty much just do what you want.
Well, actually, later on, there in fact is a temporal prime directive.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, this is somewhat of the precursor to that, at least in the minds of the people making it. This was written by Rick Berman, who was, of course, the showrunner, and Rick Berman was kind of was kind of seen as like the keeper of Star Trek, especially after Roddenberry passed away. and Rick Berman and Brandon Braga did a lot of these things together, and they were running the shows all the way through Enterprise. What's amazing to me is that this is one of my favorite episodes. It's a Rick Berman script, and I don't usually like Berman's writing. I don't know what clicked in his head in this episode, because he's not usually anything like this clever. But I also wonder, he's usually a little drier than this. But I also, like, this is just kind of more fun than I thought Berman was capable of. And if you ever watch Berman speak, I mean, like, he's a business guy. I mean, like, through and through, he's a businessman before he's a writer. Here, he's a real writer. He's doing a lot of really fun character things. But I also wonder how much of Matt Frewer playing Berlinghoff Rasmussen, the time traveler, the guest star on this episode, I wonder how much of his dialogue is ad-libbed.
It's a good question, because I don't know what it is with time travelers. They're usually fast talkers. Maybe it's just because they always, like, decide to make the people that invented the machine or whatever clever. I don't know. I thought that was really interesting, but I thought it was interesting, and, you know, spoilers, everybody, that we had a time-traveling con man.
Yeah.
That was brilliant, which I like the way he kind of butters up Picard by telling him he's, you know, the next Lincoln, or he's seen as, like, this famous historical figure. I thought that was really fascinating. And I like just the subtleties of how the character, once we get the reveal, I love the subtleties of how he manipulated everybody. Just, like, asking about details that would seem odd to ask about, but might seem important or interesting to other people. It's like if you went back in time, the Romans would think it's weird to ask what the leaf things on their heads were for, but we don't know what that is anymore. So it's actually a legitimately good question.
Well, that's a great point, yeah. And so he's pretending like these seemingly frivolous, random details are really important to him, because that's what somebody from the future might act like. Also, there's this great misdirection, because if you notice, all through the episode, he's asking a lot of questions, trying to get a feel for the universe, trying to gauge what the future is like, because of course he doesn't know anything about the 24th century. And I think that Berman does a really good job of not letting Berlinghoff Rasmussen know things that he shouldn't know yet. And then we see how he comes up with them. There are some things, like when Worf mentions a phaser, I'm not sure at that point why he knows what a phaser is, but for the most part, they manage that really well. And the scene you were talking about with Picard's speech, which is one of my favorite Picard speeches, and one of the reasons I picked this, because I watched TNG for Picard speeches. I love Picard, and I love Picard speeches, and he's got one of his best ones here. And in that scene, he's talking about the Prime Directive, and he looks at Rasmussen and he says, "Of course, you know about our Prime Directive." And they cut to Rasmussen, and he's obviously committing it to memory because he didn't know about that.
Yeah, I agree. I liked a lot of that stuff. See, the interesting thing is those are great subtleties of the actor's performance, and I think my biggest problem with this is how blatant they made that he was stealing things.
Yeah.
Like, you saw, like, the camera was just on his hand as he was putting something in his pocket. We did an episode we did a Geeky Gentleman on Mystery a couple weeks back at this point, or maybe months now, and I've always said that mystery works best on film because you can show things without lingering on them. And that should have been one of the things that happened here. You should have just seen him putting something in his pocket in the background while something else was going on to distract you.
I completely agree, yeah. The biggest problem with this episode is, ironically, a matter of perspective. because Rasmussen is very often, we follow him so closely that very often he seems like maybe as the guest star he's our protagonist this episode, but of course he's not. And I rather think that we should have spent more time in the episode with Picard and with the rest of the regular cast and how they're reacting to Rasmussen, and left him more of a mystery. I think the episode does a good job of not letting us know exactly what he's doing. The first time I saw it, it was a big reveal for me that he's from the past. I didn't call that.
I didn't either. There's, looking back on it, having only seen it the once already, I mean, there's a lot to let you know that, particularly when he's asking about the innovations of the time period. And I love the surveys. He gets all the information he needs using surveys.
Yeah, that was fun. And one of the best moments with regards to that is when he tells Data, "I wish I had told you to limit it to 50,000 words or less."
So Data wrote a book on each question, and which is actually one of the good. Now that you mention that, now that I think about it, that's actually one of the better reveals that he's not really that historically interested. Because he's sitting there talking about how fascinated he is by Data and how a lot of like the android's makers' work hasn't stuck around in these 200 years. And I thought it was interesting that he didn't want to know as much as he possibly could about this android, even if it's just frivolous information that the android knows that's way too over-explained or whatever. So that's a fairly good little hint.
Yeah,
right
you're
there.
right. Because I mean, if he was from the future and he was a historian, his historian colleagues would probably love to have all of that.
Yeah, I mean, his historian colleagues would probably kill him for asking for only 50,000 words.
Yeah, and you know, if everybody was more suspicious of Rasmussen, and I somewhat see why they're not more suspicious of him at the beginning. Although I did wonder when Picard says that all of his papers are in order, I really wondered what those looked like.
Yeah, that was weird. That's something that shouldn't have worked.
But if everybody was more suspicious of him and like comparing notes about Rasmussen the whole time, he does make some mistakes that would have tipped him off. And I wouldn't have noticed this had I not seen this episode. I think I've seen this 5 or 6 times. But this time around, something I noticed I didn't before is that Data asks him if he's going to be dead or if he's dead in the 26th century, if he's still around. And of course Rasmussen doesn't answer. But then later on, he says to Geordi, very little is known about Data's efficiency. And I'm like, well, wouldn't that be a tip off if you really were from the future that Data's not around anymore?
Yeah, but I mean, he's saying it to someone else.
Right. But that's why I said if everybody was comparing notes.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, that does make sense.
Because he wouldn't tell Data, but he basically just told Geordi. Like he makes little subtle mistakes that if everybody had their ducks more in a row, they would have called it faster.
And I think one thing I really did like about him is he's really clever about not being able to be interrogated. Essentially, yeah. You know, like he says, "I can't tell you these things, and you know that." And he's using this Starfleet, you know, idealism and this like incorruptibility against.
That's a great point.
Because they all want to ask questions, and they start out doing so, but as soon as Picard and him in unison essentially shut them down on those first just really big sweeping questions that it wouldn't even matter if he did answer, they back off big time. I mean, there's a couple small ones here and there, but everyone really backs off, which was clever.
Of course, they all want to trust him because, you know, they live in a utopia society where everybody trusts each other.
Yeah, and
against them.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing that I always found a little odd about Star Trek was the idea of utopias working. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
No, it's not just you. That's why you need to watch DS9. Because DS9 is all about that, or at least a lot of it is. Yeah, I mean the idea is, you know, Star Trek was created as an optimistic view of the future, whether it's realistic or not, trying to give us something to strive for, rather than depicting something as this is the way it's likely to be.
And I still think, I mean, I've said this in a couple episodes before, but I still think that Futurama is probably the most accurate depiction of human society in 1,000 years. Just because everyone has amazing technology and they all just don't care.
All right. Well, luckily this is only 300-400 years in the future.
Right. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I've just always found that like it's really funny, obviously, but just everyone has great stuff and they don't care. They just treat it like we do, you know. I mean, I've seen people throw iPhones on the couch and say this is crap. So that's my view. on technology and progression in society. So yeah, there you go, everybody. um, but to get just back a little bit to one thing I was talking about, like I said, I didn't like the shot lingered on when he was taking stuff. I felt this would have been markedly improved if they hadn't done that. Even if they'd only done it once, that would have been enough for me. Because it's just like as soon as you see him steal one thing, you go, "Oh, bad guy," which throws you off because this was so focused on him, like being this, really interesting person, and from the perspective, as you were mentioning, he seems to be our protagonist in this episode, and you keep seeing your guy steal stuff, and this is the universe where everybody is an angel and doesn't do anything wrong, so I mean, it's obvious tip that he's not really from this utopian society's future.
Well, first of all, that's not wholly accurate either, but
But I'm being
yeah,
facetious.
but here's the thing: TNG has this problem sometimes where they will bring in a guest star and they will feel like our main character. You should never do that. Guest stars, you want your shows to be about your established characters, and so guest stars are there for other reasons. So I don't think that the episode is attempting to make him the protagonist. I just feel like it spends too much time on him, and so it feels that way sometimes. The thing is, they are more subtle with it toward the beginning. And if they just wouldn't show him stealing stuff, we already have the clues we need to know that there's something weird going on with him at the very least. We know that Troy doesn't trust him, and
Troy, is that the lady with the I don't know, I'm gonna guess I'd call it a superpower?
yeah, that's where I was going. Her empathy is telling her that there's that he's hiding something from them, and his being a con man and being a pretty good con man, I buy that she doesn't know exactly what's being hidden. Troy's powers allow her to read emotion but not specific thought, so that works okay. But even more than that, when he first goes into his guest quarters and Data leaves, he's got this look on his face like, I've got this all figured out and I've got this game beat.
Yeah, I'd agree. You can tell early on that he's not necessarily wholly intentioned, but at the same time, I wish they just left it at those small things in the beginning and let him kind of run its course, as opposed to blatantly showing and pointing out, you see?
Yeah.
He's evil.
Earlier I mentioned that I wondered how much of his dialogue is improv. First of all, this role was originally intended for Robin Williams. And they couldn't get him. Of course, Robin Williams and Whoopi Goldberg are good friends, and Whoopi Goldberg is all over TNG, and they thought I guess that they could get Robin Williams. I would assume through her, although I've never heard that, but that would be my guess. And then I guess just schedules didn't line up or whatever, they couldn't get him, so they went to Matt Frewer, which was a great call because he's got a similar kind of
delivery style
and sensibility to him. And so like there's one scene in particular that cracked me up, and it took a couple times before I noticed it, but he's talking to Geordi, and he's buttering everybody up, and he's talking about famous people that are blind, and he's calling them by their last names, and he mentions Monet, and then he says Wonder.
Oh, is that Geordi's last name?
No. Stevie Wonder.
Oh,
that's
clever.
Hilarious. and you don't get contemporary references like that in Star Trek very often. I think he slipped that in there.
That sounds very possible.
Anyway, I love that. That's hilarious.
That is cute. See, I don't know. I love jokes like that, and I'm kind of mad at myself for not getting.
Well, like I said, I didn't catch it until the third or fourth time I saw it, and then I was, wait a minute, Wonder.
Oh, that is hilarious. Oh man. Yeah, I did love his delivery and stuff. I mean, he worked out really well. I don't know if Williams could do it the same way, because he is obviously really kind of running around the room and 7 meters, stuff like that. But there's a subtlety to it that I don't think I've seen Williams pull off in a non super serious serial
Especially
killer
at that
role.
point in his career. This would have
Yeah.
been like around 91, 92.
Yeah.
And I just think he probably wouldn't have held it back. He probably wouldn't have reeled it in enough to play that role. I don't think he was right for it. But yeah, this is one of, if not my favorite, one-shot guest characters in TNG, which is the reason I picked it. And it's funny because it's not. I mentioned this when we did our last episode. This episode is not a an important episode in any way, shape, or form. This is never referenced again, but it's one of my favorites as far as standalone episodes. Interestingly, Berlinghoff Rasmussen says that he's from the 22nd century, and he doesn't say exactly what part of the 22nd century he's from. But I always felt like Enterprise had a huge missed opportunity to not bring him back, because Enterprise is a prequel set in the 22nd century. And you could have very easily done a Berlinghoff Rasmussen episode. And it was only, 7 or 8 years after this, so he was still young enough he could have pulled it off. And I really wish they had thought to do that.
That would have been cool. See, one of the things that I was kind of like, oh, well, I guess you can't do that because of the end, but he did have that line at some point that he was like, he and a colleague were on another ship just before this or something.
No, he was in the 22nd century, and the guy who had the ship made the mistake of going back to the 22nd century where he was, and he just steals his ship from him.
No, I know that. I'm saying because of the ending, you couldn't do it, but he did have a line where he was like, a colleague and I were just on another ship. Like they'd been like, this is just something that historians from my century do. We go back and we time travel because, hey, and like I thought it would have been cool if they're like, oh, was that a reference to TOS?
Well, no, but that was all a lie. He's not.
Yeah, I know it was a lie. I'm saying it doesn't work because of how the episode.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah, I just thought that was clever. I love time
But it's
travel.
funny
so
because
fun things you can do.
See, what's really interesting is, I mentioned Enterprise. Enterprise has some stuff because they had to go off and make that the time travel show, and it didn't really work very well. But obviously it's set in the 22nd century, but they also have references to the 26th. So like, both of those centuries are in Enterprise. And like, I don't know, they could have done something with that.
Yeah, they probably could have. Let's talk a little bit about how it ended.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about them leaving someone from the 22nd century in their own time.
Yeah, because they don't know how that's going to affect their past at all. I mean, like there's all that moralizing about not affecting the future, but then as far as I'm concerned, your past is my future. All of that. And that's great, but then it's like, well, Picard, you're gonna keep this guy in the present, and you took him out of his own. I mean, he was gonna go back. You don't know what he would have done when he went back that might necessitate, or that might be necessary to the future to the present you're currently living in.
And as you said, it obviously didn't have any bearing on the series at all, so it's not an actual issue that was a problem, but it's one of those things if you think about and you understand, paradoxes of time travel, it is one of those.
And Star Trek is notoriously not good at that.
With time travel and paradoxes?
And I mean, there's a ton of time travel. Knowing that you're into time travel, Ian, I considered doing a time travel episode for every series.
I mean, that's fine. I'm not going to say don't, but just at the same time, I'd like to try to get some variety of it.
Well, obviously, I didn't pick one for TOS already.
Well, yeah.
Like I abandoned. No, I'm just saying I abandoned that premise before we even did our TOS episode.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you realized that after we did the TOS.
No. I'm just saying, like, if I had wanted to, I could have done one for every series. I mean, Star Trek has lots of time travel, but like if you go to First Contact, for instance, the film, they go back in time, and there are people who die in the past, people from the past who die in the past, who are kind of important people as far as we can tell, because they're working on the first warp vessel. And then we come back to the present and nothing has changed. And it really doesn't make any sense because like 8 or 9 people in Zephram Cochrane's facility where he's building the first warp ship that is the thing that starts the ball rolling for all of this space travel. None of what you're saying? None of those people got married and had children?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm gonna try not to quote Doctor Who too much, but the paradoxes tend to work themselves out.
But that's the thing is that in Trek they're not all that worried about paradoxes. And it gets kind of silly because this is the kind of time travel where you can go back and you can change things, except when you can't. That's the thing, is that they're not consistent with it. There are places, particularly there's a TNG episode called Time Zero. It's a 2-parter, and that is an episode where the time travel was necessary, where all the stuff that happened in the past already happened from the future. But that's the only place in Star Trek that does it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gotta love it. It's I love when it just. You see, time travel is such an awesome plot device, but no one knows how to wrap it up correctly, and I'm always impressed when I see people like actually make it work. Make the changes in the past work, or you fix it just right. I love that technically they never quite fixed it in Back to the Future. Technically, it's all still screwed up, but it's similar enough that who cares?
And what's funny is Star Trek time travel is similar to Back to the Future time travel in that you can go back and you can make changes, except for that one place where the changes are already there.
Yeah, I do love it.
Kind of funny. Hey, let me mention this too. Since we're talking about inconsistencies, I love this episode, but I'm aware of its problems. One thing that I really don't understand is how this guy from the 22nd century that can't possibly 100% fully understand this futuristic technology was able to get that ship to accept his handprint.
Well, like, that part, not so much, because, we have ways to fake out handprints now. That's not incredibly difficult, especially as, we get closer and closer to a technological singularity. My problem is just how the hell he figured out how to pilot the thing. Because, I don't know, Cap, let's say you steal, you're hanging out in the park with your son there, and some guy lands a helicopter, and you knock him out, and like, well, I guess I'll fly this thing now. I'm not saying that you're not savvy at, picking up a controller or whatever, but there's so much that goes into flying just an aerial craft compared to a land craft. How well did you do the first time you got in a car?
Yeah, not necessarily in Star Trek, though. The thing is, we don't know anything about the vessel. It could work completely by voice command.
Maybe, I don't know.
But the thing is that's a likelihood. You're talking 26th century. A lot of stuff in Star Trek works by voice command, and also if that kind of thing bothers you, Ian, you're going to have that issue all over Star Trek because there are so many places where somebody goes on a ship where all of the controls should be in a different language and they know how to fly it. This is a normal standard Star Trek thing. But the thing about the hand, but I really am on about the handprint thing because this is not technology that he knows anything about. Yeah. So I don't know how he would be able to get it to accept that. He steals the guy's clothes. And then, so my point is, it required a handprint to even get in the first place. What, did the idiot forget to lock his ship when he left it?
I
guess.
How
did he get in the first place is what I'm saying. I don't understand that.
Okay, so wait, TNG's in the 24th century, right? Okay. This guy's from the 22nd. Picard's talking about nuclear war in the 21st in the beginning of this. Because he's mentioning nuclear winter. Yes. What kind of... I'm assuming Star Trek's actually laid out the history of the world up until TOS. Exactly what the hell was going on in just 100 years after, a nuclear war? That's my question right now. I'm just trying to figure out who would travel to, because I saw the very first episode of TNG, and there was like these essentially barbaric, medieval almost courts. Was that from the 22nd century or something?
No, that was Q screwing with people. That was just Q is an omnipotent being. He made those people up.
Well, no, I thought I could have sworn that No, I know it wasn't actually the corpse, but wasn't he modeling it after?
Yeah, I forget now. It's been a while since I've seen Farpoint. I think you're right. I think that's mentioned. It gets a lot more solidified later. You got to understand there's a lot of weird retconning that goes on in Star Trek with things like
Fair
that
enough.
because that was Roddenberry, and he likes to make the 300 years ago look ancient. And people will call like 20th and 21st century technology ancient, which is always funny because it's only a few hundred years. I mean, like, we're not going to look back on technology they had in the 18th century and call it ancient. It doesn't make any sense, right? So
Yeah.
so no, that's all kind of smoothed over later on, especially again with First Contact. So basically, the idea is we had the eugenics wars in the 90s, and that was all about genetic engineering, and that started things on a really bad, violent path, and then that leads into World War III. And then World War III decimated most of the world. And then the beginning of the 21st century, really the middle of the 21st century, people are slowly starting to get civilization back, but it's pretty bad off. And then Zefram Cochrane invents the warp vessel, and he invents warp drive, and being able to go faster than the speed of light is the thing that gets other species, especially the Vulcans, to notice you. At that point, you were technologically advanced enough that the Vulcans will make first contact with you. And once the Vulcans see that we have warp travel, they make first contact with us, and then that's when things start to go in and they share technology, and that's when things start to go in a direction where the Earth pulls itself up out of all of that awfulness.
Okay, so by the 22nd century, it wouldn't still be anarchy then. Okay.
No, not past the. I mean, like that. The First Contact is it happens in the year 2063, and then things are way better off even 10 or 20 years after that. And so by the mid 22nd century, we've got Starfleet already.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was just from my very limited knowledge of it,
sure.
I thought, like, why would you time travel? Like, I wouldn't time travel to Salem, that wouldn't be the place I go. So this guy that got his machine robbed totally deserves it.
No, he was probably going back to the time of Zefram Cochrane when he was an old man. I mean, like 22nd century. It's likely that that Starfleet was already in its infancy by the time he got there.
Okay. Yeah, I did find that interesting, the idea that he stole
I'm also using material that happened later. So, like, this episode watches a little bit better after you know about Enterprise.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mind you, like, talking about history stuff with it. I love fictional histories. They're always fun.
But I'm just, when this episode was on, you wouldn't know all that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, like 22nd century, that seems like a bad place to go from the brief information I have about this.
Yeah, they shouldn't have done that. That was stupid.
Especially when you start out the episode talking about nuclear winter.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I did enjoy just the premise.
Well, I liked it. At least as much as you did. Like I say, it's not the best TNG episode or anything, but I thought that it was a pretty accessible episode for somebody that hadn't seen it before.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a small problem I have with it. That's a problem with a lot of sci-fi, your book included. Character names are always hard to get the first time around, because everyone likes to make up crazy names, and I didn't quite know all of these, like Worf and names and words are hard to catch the first time. So I was like, I did a pretty good job of not asking you who's that. So I did like this, and it's just that's one of the big problems with sci-fi is just getting the names the first time around for accessibility.
I will say another thing that doesn't quite work for me is just that a lot of the main cast, and this happens a lot, gets a little bit oversimplified in how Rasmussen is talking to them. Like, everybody is defined wholly by their careers. Mm-hmm. And I don't really care for that. It's like I guess Worf would, but like Worf has to immediately, the one thing he cares about is the history of the phasers, and the one thing Riker cares about is the history of aviation because he's a pilot. And I'm just like people are not wholly defined by their jobs.
Yeah, but Yes and no.
That was a little oversimplified. I don't know. It's just like,
I don't know. It would have been a weird, like, part of it's working for the plot, but I mean, it would have been weird if you'd asked Worf, like, what do you think the most important technological advancement is? The machine that makes the food, whatever you request.
no, I know, but it wasn't even that so much as the fact that like earlier on in the episode, like Crusher jumps up and immediately is like, did they cure the Tellurian plague? And I'm thinking like, well, just because you're a doctor doesn't mean that there aren't other things that might pop up in your mind about history.
Fair enough.
You know that sort of thing. And also like a first time viewer watching this episode, it's great for you because it immediately kind of tells you what all these people's jobs are. But for somebody like me that's been watching the show for 4 seasons, I'm like, these people are being oversimplified all of a sudden.
Fair enough. I hadn't really thought about that, but that is kind of a gripe from the veteran on the subject.
From the perspective of somebody that knows these characters.
Yeah, but it's a good way to introduce you to the characters. I always think that if you're making a show with a lot of an ensemble cast and a lot of or what may seem like an intimidating continuity, it's important to have maybe, I don't know, I'd say it's okay to simplify your characters for an episode or two if you're trying to make something that's accessible.
Well, that's part of the reason that I picked this one also is because everybody actually kind of gets something to do. I mean, there's a lot of TNG episodes where people just don't show up. Hardly at all, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm about out of stuff to say.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, though. So, Cap, what are we talking about next
Well,
time?
next time we're gonna go into Deep Space Nine, and like I said, I wanted to have you sample Ian that one episode from every Star Trek series. So we're not doing 2-parters or anything. We're just doing single episodes, and that makes DS9 really hard to pick one. Because DS9 is, of course, notoriously, famously a not an episodic series. It's very serialized, and so I had to come up with something that you could watch without knowing anything. And DS9 has several episodes that stand alone really well, but I'm not sure you would appreciate them without knowing the characters. So I decided to pick an episode that, rather than just being an episode that's really easy to go into because you don't have to know any of these people, I rather thought it would be better to pick something that would kind of help encapsulate the series a little bit and give you a sense of what the series is like. And also, I mean, it's a standalone episode. You'll understand what's going on, but you'll also get some of the characterizations and the premise of the show. So we're gonna watch an episode from season 3. I'm telling you this time, it's from season 3.
Okay.
And it's an episode called Civil Defense. And I want to watch this one because it's kind of a fun thriller-ish episode, and it'll introduce you to the series' main villain, Dukat, and give you a sense of Dukat's relationship with Captain Sisko. Well, I guess Sisko's not even a captain yet by this point, Commander Sisko. Anyway, I'll set it up for you next time and give you a little bit of a brief rundown of what exactly is going on with Deep Space Nine and the space station and the kind of volatile relationship with the Cardassians and the Bajorans, and that's basically the stuff you'll need to know.
Okay, just really basic. This is kind of established, but it's going to be there, but not like huge to the plot kind of stuff. Cool. All right. So thank you everybody for listening. Please join us next time as we talk about that episode that's name's already slipped out of my mind.
Yes, from Deep Space Nine.
But until next time, we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing